In exactly 32 days, the United States turns 250 years old. There will be parades, fireworks bigger than anything you have seen, museums opening exhibits a decade in the making, and almost everyone watching will believe the same simple story about how this all started. One document, one date, one moment of signing. Almost none of it happened the way you think. By the end of this video, you will know 5 things about America's founding that sound completely made up, but are true. And number 5 connects 2 presidents, 50 years, in the exact same date in a way that historians still find hard to believe. Let us start with the date everyone already has wrong. July 4th, 1776 is the day printed on the Declaration of Independence. It is the day we celebrate. It is the day this entire 250-year commemoration is built around. But July 4th is not the day independence was voted on. It is not the day it was signed. It is the day the wording was approved and sent to the printer. The actual vote happened 2 days earlier on July 2nd. John Adams was so certain that date would become the holiday that he refused, for the rest of his life, to celebrate on the 4th. He turned down invitations. He called it the wrong day in writing until he died. And the most famous image of all, 56 men crowding around a table to sign, that did not happen on July 4th either. Most signatures were added over the following weeks. Some signers were not even in Philadelphia that day. The famous signing did not happen on the day everyone thinks it happened. So if the date is wrong, what else is? Fact 1. The Declaration almost did not survive the printing. After the vote, the document went to a local printer named John Dunlap, working through the night. The copies that came off his press are called the Dunlap broadsides, and for over 200 years, almost nobody remembered they existed. They were used as scrap paper, folded into pockets, lost. Today, only 26 are known to survive. One was found behind a $4 painting bought at a flea market and sold decades later for over $8 million. The most important sentence in American history was, for a while, basically a piece of junk mail. Fact 2. The Liberty Bell did not ring on July 4th. This is the image stamped onto a quarter, painted in textbooks, replayed every 4th of July. A bell ringing out across Philadelphia, announcing freedom to the world. The bell tower it hung in was, at the time, structurally unsound. Historians have found no contemporary account of it ringing that day at all. The story appears to have been invented decades later, for children's books, to give the revolution a sound effect. The bell did not even get the name Liberty Bell until the 1830s, when abolitionists adopted it as a symbol 60 years after the fact. Fact 3. The man who wrote "All men are created equal" enslaved over 600 people across his lifetime. Thomas Jefferson drafted the document's most famous line while living on a plantation that depended on slave labor. He knew the contradiction. He wrote about it privately, calling slavery a moral and political evil. He also continued to benefit from it until his death. This is not a footnote historians like to skip past. It is, for many, the central tension of the entire founding. The same pen that wrote the words that would eventually be used to argue for freedom for everyone belonged to a man who did not act on them in his own life. Both of those facts are true at the same time. That is the uncomfortable part. Fact 4. The Declaration was not really written for the British. Read the actual document, and the structure is strange. After the famous opening lines, it spends most of its length on something else entirely. A long list of grievances against the king. 27 of them, specific, detailed, almost legalistic. That is because the Declaration was not primarily a philosophy paper. It was a legal argument aimed at a very specific audience. Other countries, especially France, who the colonies desperately needed as allies and creditors. The most quoted sentences in American history were essentially the opening pitch. And the part everyone forgets was the actual point. And fact 5, the one that still gives historians chills. 50 years after the Declaration was approved, on the exact 50th anniversary, July 4th, 1826, 2 of its authors died. John Adams in Massachusetts, Thomas Jefferson in Virginia, the same day, the 50th anniversary to the day. Adams's last words were reportedly about Jefferson, not realizing Jefferson had died hours earlier that same morning. Two of the most important figures in the country's founding gone on the same date, exactly half a century later. Historians have never found anything to suggest it was anything but coincidence. It remains one of the strangest dates in American history. So why does almost nobody know any of this? Part of the answer is simple. For most of American history, this kind of detail was genuinely hard to find. The Dunlap broadsides were scattered in attics and archives. The debate over Jefferson's contradictions was mostly confined to specialist historians, decades before it entered classrooms. The Liberty Bell myth was printed in school books for over a century before anyone seriously checked the sources. It is not that someone, somewhere, decided to hide the messy version. It is that the simple version was printed first, repeated the most, and by the time better research caught up, the simple version already had a 100-year head start. Here is the uncomfortable truth about how national stories work. A real founding is messy. It involves a wrong date, a forgotten document, an uncomfortable contradiction, and a legal filing dressed up as poetry. None of that fits on a stamp. None of it fits in a single sentence a 6-year-old can repeat back. So the messy version gets quietly replaced. One date, one bell, one signing, one sentence. The story gets simpler with every retelling. And simpler is not the same as true. This is not unique to America. Every country does this with its own founding. The myth is not a lie exactly. It is a story that survived because it was easy to carry, while the real story was heavy and got left behind. So what do you do with this? Right as the country turns 250, you do not need to be cynical about the celebration. The parades are real. The anniversary is real. 250 years is genuinely remarkable. But here's the difference. When you know the real version, the celebration means something different. It is not we got it perfect on day one. It is we have spent 250 years arguing about what those words actually mean, and we are still doing it. The line about all men being created equal was not fully true the day it was written. It became more true, slowly, painfully, over the next 2 centuries, by people who took the words more seriously than the man who first wrote them down. And that is not a flaw in the story. That might be the actual story. And this year, you do not have to take anyone's word for it. With museums across the country opening new exhibits specifically built around this anniversary, this is, for once, an unusually good year to go look at the primary sources yourself. Original broadsides, letters between Adams and Jefferson, written decades after they were rivals, when they had become friends again in old age, writing to each other about exactly these contradictions. The actual document, with its 27 grievances, sitting under glass. Most years, that history sits quietly in archives. This year, it is being deliberately put on display for exactly the reason you would hope, so people can see the complicated version for themselves instead of the version that fits on a stamp. So, in 32 days, watch the fireworks. But when you do, you will know that the date is a little bit wrong, the bell was probably silent, the document's author lived a contradiction he never resolved, and the most famous lines were really the opening argument of a legal brief aimed at France. And maybe that version is more worth celebrating. Not because it is simple, but because somehow, against the odds, 250 years later, it is still here. Still being argued about, still being lived out. That argument is the inheritance. And in 32 days, it turns 250.